Well, we're off to the Faroe Islands, and this is a real treat in many, many ways because this place, the food culture, the marine environment, and the history is just about unprecedented. So it's about 18 major islands, roughly population of 54,000 people, and they've been there for quite a while. Roughly 1,000 years. They have visited these islands, and I like what these fellows are saying. Where'd that new cruise ship come from? They've had cruise ships visiting now for 1,000 years. Well, I love this saying that the Faroese have, and it's basically like you can prepare all you want, but your things are going to change. We have to be the maybe philosophy. Expect the unexpected, basically. So that's based on their environment. They've lived on these islands in this extreme environment for 1,000 years, and they have adapted to life on the Faroe Islands. So I have a question here for you. What is this fellow up to? It's a big rope. You know, he's at the end of the rope. Guess what's at the other end of the rope? Basically the whole village. So this is a communal event at the perfect time of the year. And what they're doing is fulmar hunting and egg collecting. Do you know what the fulmar is? It's a seabird. I'll show you a photograph. But they lower that fellow down the cliff, and in many communities, this is a rite of passage. Whenever you reach that age, the men are lowered down on the rope, and they come back with the fulmar. That's what the northern fulmar looks like. It's a seabird, and it's a little bit like the albatross. If you look at the nose, it has a tube. It's a tube-nosed seabird, and these seabirds live on fishing. They are the size of a gull, basically. They look very much like a gull. But the fact that they have a tube nose tells you something interesting. They find their food through their nose, through their olfactory organ. They can smell a mass of fish near the surface, and that's how they hone in on them. They also have a salt gland because they drink seawater, so they have to get rid of the salt. But it's not associated with the tube. So those are two fascinating facts. The other thing about the fulmar is these young fellows who are being lowered down they are looking for these young birds, and they're collecting the eggs. They're actually collecting the birds. But you know what the fulmar has up its sleeve? It's a projectile vomiter. So if you're not really skilled at doing this, you're going to get a face full. Now, I have a little video to show you that it's not great quality video, which I'm thankful for, because what it shows you is a little bit disgusting. So that's how the young chicks defend themselves. And this stuff that they're spraying all over is very offensive smelling. It's sticky, and you might think, well, you know, it's not pleasant if you get a blast of that in your face. But if you're a predator, this is the great skua, and it's a bird that actually comes and hunts for these chicks on the sea cliffs. If a skua gets sprayed with that vomit, that could be the end, because it soaks into the feathers, they're no longer waterproof. They can die. So it's an effective strategy for survival. Well, the Faroese food culture, as I did my research for this presentation, I had to draw a very fine line, because what the Faroese people are accustomed to eating is difficult to perceive. I'll have to tell you that. So they have something called fermented meat, and they call this the fifth flavor. After sour, sweet, bitter, and salty, there's rotten, or I mean fermented. And it's a unique contribution to Faroese to international cuisine. So I'm going to be telling you about this. And it's fascinating to me. So getting back to what I said initially was, please do not leave me here. I couldn't survive on the diet. So this is very much related to the seafood, the marine environment, and also the sheep, the mutton. So we know that the Vikings arrived over 1,000 years ago, and what they faced was this incredible terrain that they had to figure out how to survive here. Of course, they had their survival skills when they arrived. They came from various parts of Scandinavia, they had their culture, and they were familiar with living in these kinds of terrain and these kinds of environment and the marine habitat. So it wasn't entirely new to them, but the Faroese have evolved a culture that is unique to them. So gathering the seabirds and gathering the eggs was very important for survival in those early days. They brought some sheep with them, but agriculture was almost non-existent. So they were surviving off of whatever creatures that they could find, and particularly the seabirds nesting on these cliffs. And so that has carried on all throughout the centuries, very independent. These people fed their families, for their community, fished for their communities, but early days, they were living in quite isolated places around these islands, fending for themselves. I want to show you the climate in the Faroe Islands. It's remarkably consistent. Winter and summer, because of the temperate ocean currents, you can see that it doesn't get really, really cold, although it does feel really cold because it's windswept, and the temperatures are always much colder. So there's Celsius at the top, Fahrenheit below. It rarely goes down into the minus temperatures, but it feels very cold. It's that bone-chilling wind. The winds can reach 155 miles per hour. That has been recorded here. Do you see this waterfall? The water is being sent upwards as spray. That's a waterfall that's flowing the wrong way. So they have hurricane-force winds that come to these islands quite frequently during the winter months. Well, they went from these independent communities to becoming traders. And over the centuries, there's been a big transformation. 18th, 19th century, one of the big things was that they learned how to preserve the fish using salt. So they could get bigger ships that would go out for longer periods. You can see the transformation over the centuries. A fascinating part is the cod wars, and the arrival of aquaculture has really changed the economy here. So meat and seafood, those are the main things. They grow crops, but it's not really an agricultural economy or community. The staple are the cod, and they have been throughout the centuries. Enormous numbers of cod in these northern Atlantic waters. So they would make this meal, cod and potatoes. That was almost their daily staple diet. So I'm going to show you a little video here to give you some idea of the fisheries, how important it is to this part of the world.
Before you can understand whaling, you need to understand how important the ocean is to this small collection of islands. Fishing and fishing products account for 95% of this nation's exports. Among those is salted cod, or bacalhau, a daily staple for many islanders.
Here, what they are specializing in is salted cod. What do you know about cod?
A lot.
Tell me everything.
This is Bierski. For decades, he was a sailor and a fisherman.
I have been fishing a lot of cod, you know, thousands and thousands of tons of cod.
This morning, our breakfast is a 2-course bacalhau meal, starting with a soup. The salted fish is soaked in water for 48 hours to rehydrate and reduce its brininess. Then it's cubed. Cubes of salmon, potatoes, carrots, and bacalhau are piled in a bowl with parsley sprinkled on top. The colorful heap is submerged in a steamy soup made from fish bones, sriracha, cream, salt, carrots, onion, and thyme.
I'm gonna try just some of this broth. Oh, that's delicious. Oh, it's so buttery and creamy. It tastes like a gravy.
Yeah, tastes very nice.
The fish tastes good. Still very salty, but not too salty. I like it.
There's very, very, very little of it, huh?
You would put more cod?
Yes, of course.
So I just wanted to show you a few, quickly I'll show you some charts here, but to show you how important fisheries, 45% of the GDP is based on harvesting the marine creatures that live around the Faroe Islands. So on the scale of things, these days now we have industrial commercialized fishing. And as someone who, I'm not a real fisher person, but when I see the scale of the fishing that goes on here, it's just almost mind-boggling, the numbers of fish that are being caught. So I'll show you another little video here showing this is the level of industrial fishing in these North Atlantic waters today. So that's a huge, huge industry. The volumes of fish that go through these processing plants, and they're exported. So these are the main export countries. Denmark is the leading trade partner, but the USA is also very close, about $200 million worth per year. They're not happy about the 10% tariffs. Employment, once again, fisheries and aquaculture is the leading main source of employment in these islands. Salmon farming, now cod was the mainstay until aquaculture arrived. And salmon farming now, you can see, is roughly 700 million US dollars a year. And cod is about 170. So aquaculture has far, far outproportioned the wild caught fish, except maybe if you added up all of these: herring, whiting, mackerel. So 50% is based on salmon farming. We've seen these salmon farms in the fjords of Norway. They're becoming more and more advanced. And my colleague, Carmine, he mentioned the salmon farming. It has been traditionally a very harmful production method because of the waste that flows into the water. So they're trying to improve that all the time. It is still controversial, but it's such a huge part of the economy here that it's not going to go anywhere soon. So improvements are being made. But you know, these are the main exports for the salmon: Spain, Netherlands, Denmark, France. So it's mainly the Europeans who are buying the farmed salmon from the Faroe Islands. And where I come from, I live in British Columbia, Canada. Farmed versus wild salmon is very controversial because the farmed salmon have lice, the sea lice, and as the wild stock, the young ones leave the rivers and go out into the ocean, they pick up the sea lice. So it has had a very harmful effect on the wild salmon in our British Columbian waters. So it's very controversial, but in Faroe Islands, there's something that is way more controversial. And you'll probably guess what it is. It's whaling. And so that this is something that's part of their culture, and they hunt the pilot whales. And the way it works is that if some fisherman out around the shores of Faroe Islands sees a school of pilot whales, he'll contact everyone by radio. They all go rushing out there with their boats, and they herd them into shore. Now I'm not going to show you the graphic stuff because it gets very graphic. It's a very cruel practice to my way of thinking, but to the locals, it has been part of their culture for centuries. So they bring in the pilot whales, they kill all of them and eat them. And you can very easily see pilot whale meat in the Faroe Islands. The thing about the pilot whales is that these are some of the most intelligent creatures on the planet. They have a language, they have culture, they have dialects, different families pick up different languages, skills. And we know, in fact, some dolphins, I'm not sure about pilot whales, but some dolphin species have been proven that they call themselves by their individual names, and the other ones refer to them by name. These are very smart. You know, whales have had large brains on the scale that we're not familiar with for over 15 million years. And our brains are big, but we've had them for less than 1 million. So there's a lot going on in those brains. Things like this happen where if one of them is weak or injured, the other ones get together and they'll actually push them up to the surface so they can breathe. It's quite remarkable. There are very close family ties. They're a matriarchal society. The eldest female looks after the family. She knows where the food is at different times of year, and it's passed on from female to female. The young males, they're just looking for a neighboring pod where the most beautiful princess is available. But once they've discovered the princess, they come back to their own pod. So this is what pilot whale meat looks like. It's very, very dark, black. It's because of the hemoglobin content of the muscles. These whales are deep divers. One of their main sources of food is squid, and they hunt the squid as a family unit. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how the Faroese culture would perceive this whaling.
Like that?
The reality now is that people don't have to do it,
No.
but they still continue. Why do you think that is?
In order to understand the locals, I'm gonna eat like a local.
What is the most you've ever gotten one day?
200, 300 kilo. That is pure meat.
I'm on a mission to discover why this practice still goes on, and if their actions today could lead to these animals going extinct forever.
Is this sustainable?
Well, to that question, is it sustainable? They really are not taking a huge number of pilot whales. So, but the other part of it is we don't know exactly how many whales there are. So it is considered sustainable in these islands. Just a little bit more history here.
Nestled in the heart of the North Atlantic is the Faroe Islands, an archipelago of rugged beauty. It is a place where tradition and nature collide in a way that has stirred both admiration and controversy. For centuries, the Faroese have relied on the ocean for sustenance, but today, the hunting of pilot whales, known as the Grundedrap, has become a global symbol of debate, raising questions about tradition and sustainability. For the Faroese, the pilot whale is not just a creature of the sea, it is a symbol of survival, community, and cultural identity.
So as far as the locals are concerned, it's part of the natural cycle of life. It's part of their culture. It's done at a sustainable level. But from the outsider's perspective, it's a very cruel practice, and there's a damage to the Faroese reputation in a way. It might have an impact on tourism. We don't really know the ecological impacts because we don't have a really good grasp of actual numbers of pilot whales. So I was really fascinated when I found a little clip showing something completely different, taken in the Faroe Islands in June this year. Here's another group rescuing stranded pilot whales and trying to push them back out to sea. So perspectives change. Maybe some of the outsider perspective is soaking into the Faroese culture. I don't know. Maybe the guys around the corner got those pilot whales. Who knows? So they have been gathering the seabirds, the eggs for all these centuries. And one of them is the puffins. And the puffins are the most charismatic, beautiful little seabirds, to my way of thinking. They don't even look like seabirds, really. but they're excellent fishermen. They have stubby little wings. They fly underwater to catch their fish. Their population is doing well. It's still healthy. These fish are called sand eels, and that's their favorite food. The sand eel population has diminished, so these puffins have to fly further and further out from shore to catch their favorite food. Some of the seabirds are not doing as well. The populations for kittiwakes, for example, the numbers have come down since the 80s. There's also the changing ocean temperatures. The ecology of these waters is changing. If you come to my last presentation, just before we get to Iceland, I'll be telling you about the ocean currents and how things are changing quite rapidly up in these northern waters. But that is changing things as far as these seabirds are concerned. So it's a big challenge to find that right balance between harvesting the eggs, the seabirds, harvesting all these fish that they rely on, and this is an ongoing balance that we're trying to achieve in these modern days. Tourism is an important part of the Faroese economy. Roughly 130 to 140,000 visitors, 112 million US dollars economic impact of tourism. And so it's good that we're coming here and bringing our dollars. Roughly 1,000 jobs rely on visitors like us coming to the islands. So here's another interesting food habit. Does anyone recognize this? You'll never guess what this is. Fermented shark. And I have not tried this. How many people are up for fermented foods? Oh, good, because you can come back and report back to me. So look at the process for this. You bury it for 6 to 12 weeks. That's called initial fermentation. Then it's cut into strips after they dig it up, and then you have to dry it, hang it to dry for several months. And that's what you get, cubes of fermented shark. Now, as a biologist, the part that I don't agree with, that I don't really like, is the fact that one of the main species of shark that they're using is this one, the Greenland shark. This is an incredible creature that lives down deep in these cold Atlantic waters. It is a big shark. It can be up to 21 feet. Do you know that these are the longest lived vertebrates on the planet? They live over 300 years. Hard to believe. So who knows how old is that shark that you're chewing on? It could be 300 years old. They're native to these cold North Atlantic waters. And I find this interesting. They have this, whatever it is, some sort of oxide that is toxic to humans. So they have to go through this whole process so they can eat this fermented shark. If you do taste this, please come and find me, because I really want to hear. So back to the fulmar, this ocean seagoing bird. Interestingly enough, in the 1800s, there were only 1 or 2 colonies known up in these waters. But since commercial fisheries, the colonies have spread. So the fulmar are feeding off of the waste that the commercial fisheries are leaving behind. And so they've spread to a much larger area. You can see all throughout northern Norway, Scotland, UK, Iceland, Greenland, Svalbard. So now there's colonies everywhere. So in some ways, the Fulmar are doing quite well in their population. But there's one part of their life cycle that the Fulmar really are being taken advantage of. At the stage where they're fledged, where they're supposed to be able to fly, if they don't jump off the cliff into the water, the parents will push them. Problem is, they still can't fly. So you'll see in this little video, this is when the Faroese go out hunting.
Faroe Islands. The Fulmar's hunt is an annual catch, which is only for about a week or so. These young birds in the mountain shelves, in late August they are big enough to leave the shelves, and if they don't go by themselves, their parents push them. At that point of time they are really fat and they're not able to fly because they're too fat to fly. Huh? So they kind of float around in the sea for a couple of days. And that's when we take action and go out and catch them.
So Fulmar is on the menu. These are the fat birds, the adolescents that they're too fat to fly, but they put them in the pot. So throughout North Atlantic, they have actually done quite well. But our latest statistics in the Faroe Islands don't look so good. This is the sort of the documented record for population on this one island, and it's really gone down. So that's an interesting part. So these traditions are at a crossroads. As more and more visitors come to the Faroe Islands and they hear the outsider perspectives, the locals, I think, are, in many ways, they're very defensive of their culture, of the eating the fulmar, the puffin eggs, the pilot whales, all of these things, Greenland sharks. So they're at a crossroads. And one of the interesting things is that they've had conflict in the past because they are in such a valuable location out here in the middle of this North Atlantic. That's their economic zone in red, but they're bordered by all these other countries, the economic zones. So fisheries, fish don't realize that they're going from one economic zone to the other. So we've had things like the Cod Wars, where navies, actually naval ships from Britain or from Iceland, getting involved, disputing where the boundary is with the Faroese fishermen. One of the big catches is blue whiting. And we saw that in that video. That's what the blue whiting looks like. And you might think, well, that ends up as fish and chips. But 90% of blue whiting ends up as pellets to feed the salmon. So they are the protein source for the salmon. So one of the things that people like me, biologists, talk about is, why don't we just eat the blue whiting and skip the salmon, and it would be much more efficient. So this shows you blue whiting catches. It's going up over the years. In this area, the herring collapsed in the 1960s. You can see this segment. Basically, it took many decades for the herring stock to come back, but it's still not really at the levels that it was. So that's a little bit about mainly the seafood, that culture evolved around that. Now I want to take us onshore, and traditions of hundreds of years of eating the sheep or the mutton.
Here comes. I'm here to experience the delightfully bizarre way the sheep is prepared.
You know, I've eaten sheep and mutton and lamb in many different countries, but never in a place like the Faroe Islands. I know here there's very different techniques for preservation, for cooking food fresh, but also for preserving meat over time, including some fermented and dry meat. Does it have a fermented smell to it?
It absolutely has. Sometimes it's so strong it makes you cough. That's the fermented smell of it.
I have a lot to learn today. First things first, we have to go get that sheep.
So this is the shed that they ferment the mutton. It just looks, you'll see this on the Faroe Islands. Everyone has a shed. And when you look inside, you realize that it's drafty. It's made especially for this process of fermentation.
What people don't realize watching right now is this room is extremely drafty. It's not like a direct wind, but there's a draft that comes through the walls.
Exactly.
The local weather and the room itself ensure the right temperature, humidity, and airflow.
We tend to just use the nature to control the fermentation. So if it's too cold, the fermentation doesn't go well. If it's too hot, we probably too fermented. Luckily, we have an average, more or less perfect climate for fermentation of meat. That's why we do it.
So that's what these sheds look like on the inside. There's no real preparation. They hang the sheep or the mutton or the pieces of meat, and they let them sit there for months, usually 3-4 months. And the cold air, the salty air, does the job of, they like to use the word fermentation.
These are slaughtered just yesterday and today, and the process of fermentation is starting now, and it will go on for 3 months. In 3 months, it will look like this. Actually, the leg.
Gosh, what is it like? Do you know how you describe that?
Hard to describe, but something very strong.
Taste this one.
And then when you cut it open, that's when the ammonia comes out. This has such a strong smell to it. So I've just peeled the fat away quite easily. And then what remains is a semi-dry, kind of gummy, soft meat. Sure. Oh, that's lovely. A very unique, fascinating texture. It's a melt in your mouth kind of texture. It does have a slight cheesy quality to it.
It's exactly the taste you're talking about. Some of the Scandinavian cheeses and French cheeses, they have exactly this kind of taste.
I can't help but laugh, but I'm not going to taste that. I hope I don't even smell it. So hopefully I've given you some notion of the cultural context of the food in the Faroe Islands, how they're associated with the marine environment. It's the fact that they are ecologically sensitive, these people. So they really are trying to take care of all of these creatures as they eat them. But they have a very controversial effect, particularly the whaling on the outside visitors. So as you visit the Faroe Islands, you'll realize we're not in Kansas. And how often you get to try fermented food that is this quality. I mean, it's just a whole new flavor. So I have, these are my final words of advice. When you taste fermented meat, don't let your face do the talking before your tongue does. So thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate seeing you. Have a great day at sea.